Welcome. Back by popular demand, we are doing a sequel to a previously asked question. And the question today from A Piece Potato is, what's the most wholesome experience you've had with a stranger? Hi, this is Derek. I just put the Drama Llama, Fred, back in his llama pen, so that I can do this quick video for you with some of the stuff that Fred found on Reddit earlier today. Oh boy, let's get ready for some drama. Data Murata answered with, when I was 18 I had a friend in the hospital with brain cancer. His time was limited. I visited him when I could. He was kind of hippie alternative punk. I wore a leather jacket and had long hair. I walked to his room, a nurse saw me. Without saying a word she walked to me and gave me a long comforting hug. That's how I knew he passed. I was Auto followed up with, I'm sorry for your loss. You just made me cry. Donut Carrot All answered with, I was really drunk and started puking in the trash can in the women's bathroom since there was a line to get to a toilet. One of the girls in line held my hair up and rubbed my back, telling me I'd be okay. I drunkenly told her I loved her. I may also have been crying. Wherever you are, bathroom girl, I still love you. Blonde Oil answered with, I was in Edinburgh, traveling alone. I met some guys at the hostel, and we went to a club, but it was weird, so I came back to the hostel. The hostel is on the Royal Mile. It's 2 a.m. and there is a girl doing poi juggling. I did some poi juggling myself, so I stopped to watch, and when she stopped, started talking to her. I asked her where she was from. She said Brazil. So, being a stereotype guy like I was, I asked her whether she knew capoeira. She did. So, on Friday night, on the Royal Mile, me and a stranger did capoeira. It was more than 20 years ago, and I still remember it. It was awesome. Bluegrass Mommy answered with, I have been diagnosed with PTSD, depression, and anxiety, and I was at the pharmacy trying to get my meds filled, but my card kept declining. A couple of the meds have major side effects if I skip a dose, so I really couldn't go without them. I was frantic and trying to figure out what was wrong with my card when another lady smiled and swiped her card for me so I could get my medication refilled. Grand Jack 23 answered with, I was going to a Starbucks to eat with a friend I met days ago. Suddenly a stranger about my age asked me how to go to that exact same place, so I told him that I was going there too, and we started a conversation while walking. When we got to the Starbucks, we sat at different tables and I waited for my friend. He didn't appear, because he had some problems and finally he couldn't go. I asked the stranger if I could eat with him and he accepted. Now we are friends and we sometimes talk through our mobiles. Edit grammar. Nope, English isn't my first language, but I'm still learning. Strone's Throwaway followed up with, driving on the highway, the car in front of me suddenly swerved to take an exit, and then tried to swerve back onto the highway, almost sideswiping me in the process. Luckily there was no one to my left, so I veered into the left lane and avoided an accident. A few moments later I'm passing her, and she very sheepishly looks up at me, kind of anticipating and expecting someone to cuss her out. Well, I had just learned a new road trip trick. Flipping people off is stupid, but giving them a thumbs down really stays with someone. It's the I'm not mad, I'm disappointed of the road. I had a huge ass thumbs down queued up for this driver, but when I saw her face I immediately knew she didn't mean to. She was embarrassed, and she already felt bad enough. So instead I flashed her a huge smile, dramatically and jokingly wiped sweat from my brow, and gave her a giant thumbs up. She smiled and laughed, and honestly it's one of my favorite moments in my life. Punt 4 Stick followed up with, I had just lost my job and my dad had his card stolen. He was waiting on the bank but completely out of food and living in an old, run-down RV. I would have figured something out. I'd die before I let him starve. Right as he's almost in tears talking to me about it, someone knocked on the door. A lady had food for someone in an RV, but those people had vacated the parking lot and she wanted to know if my dad needed any. Some sort of local helping hands org. There was everything from canned goods, to fresh meat, milk, pasta. Everything. She had bought it with her own money and didn't want it to go to waste. I'll never forget the timing, or her generosity. Manual Propulsion followed up with, I'm a wheelchair user. At a baseball game, A little girl came running up to me and climbed onto my lap. Her mom was apologetic, but I told her it was fine, no worries. Looking at the girl's face, I could tell she had some kind of developmental disability. Mom explained to me that the little girl's grandfather used a wheelchair and she missed him. I rolled around a little to give her a ride, she giggled and had a good time, then she climbed off and went back to her mom. Saptaji Banerjee followed up with. I was once traveling through an old town, when I stopped at a small shop to buy some packaged water. I was in my tweens at that time, so I jumped out of my car and went to buy. A very old man sat at the shop. Once I bought everything, he took out an ice cream and handed it to me. As I was about to take the bottles with me, he picked the bottles himself and walked with me to the car so that I could have my ice cream. He was very old and scaly, very thin too. And once he saw that I had a younger sister, he rushed back to the shop to bring out another ice cream for her. I insisted that he take money for it. But he didn't take it and just smiled. Maybe we reminded him of his grandchildren, I presume. Anan Rocky followed up with. Went to a bar to meet a date and got ghosted. So I'm sitting at the bar drinking alone and saw a woman being harassed by a drunk guy. I intervened and she acted as if she'd been waiting for me. The drunk got lost and the woman and I sat together at the bar for a couple hours. We had a really great time, lots of smiles and laughs. There were sparks for sure. She asked for my phone and started talking selfies, so I took it back from her to get some better photos. Probably captured 50 or so, some really candid ones and some silly poses. After we laughed about the photos, she got up to leave. I asked for her number and if we could go out sometime, but she declined. She thanked me for the wonderful night and said something along the lines of let's just leave it at this and enjoy the memory. Somehow I felt okay with that. I kept her photos for several years and every time I saw them they instantly brought a smile to my face. I never even knew her name, but it was one of the best dates of my life. Kiwi Guy followed up with. On my honeymoon in Greece we nearly got stranded driving our little scooter back from a day trip. Finally found a petrol station in this village, but it was during afternoon nap/siesta time. We apologized as best we could in the little Greek we knew. The guy obliged but looked a little annoyed. He casually asks where we are from and we tell him New Zealand. His face lights up and is amazed because he had never met someone from New Zealand before. He asks us, what are we doing so far away from home? We tell him that it's our honeymoon. He tells us to wait there and comes back with a bottle of wine that's obviously worth more than the €6 of petrol we are buying. He refuses for us to round up the bill, or for us to buy anything. He just tells us honeymoon is honeymoon, be happy. Go. Hands down one of the best highlights of our trip. Not Sadal followed up with. I guess this can be perceived as pathetic by some people and that's okay, but I used to go to school with a bunch of horrible people. I'm disabled so I look and walk weird. Every time I'd go out for lunch to my favorite food place and see them, they'd hurl insults. Anyway, I was standing in a long queue and they were behind me. There was an old lady, maybe like 70 to 80, behind them. They were making fun of my walk. I sorta can't walk straight because I had a stroke as a kid. And this old lady called them a bunch of cruel twats. It was really kind of her to stand up to them. I always will remember that. Back to Bach followed up with. The most wholesome and memorable experience was in a crowded New York airport with an elderly lady. I saw her crying and looking bewildered as she sat alone in the main concourse. So I sat down next to her and asked if I could help. She said she was going to a family member's funeral on the West Coast and had never been in an airport. The lady was hard of hearing and the loudspeaker announcements just compounded her confusion, to the point where she was physically trembling. At that point, as I once noted here in AskReddit, I guided her through security and directly to her gate, asking the attendants to give her special assistance. Especially with her inability to discern broadcast announcements. As an attendant escorted her for boarding, the lady turned, waved, and blew a kiss in my direction. To this day, I can still picture her vividly. DPS 15 followed up with. I started going back to the gym. First day saw a personal trainer and took some pre-workout. I was pushed pretty hard and by the time I left, I was dizzy, lightheaded and nauseous. On my drive home my symptoms got worse and progressed to the point where my arms and legs went tingly to numb, lost fine motor control, hyperventilating and my speech became nearly unintelligible. My hands locked up and I couldn't open them or move my fingers. I was essentially temporarily handicapped, but I was still thinking straight. I pulled over, hazards on, crawled out and onto the curb, fumbling about dialing 911. The operator couldn't understand me and I didn't know what was happening to me and was panicking. A woman pulled up behind me, got out and asked what was happening, if I was okay. I shook my head and handed her the phone that says 911 on the screen. I did my best to tell her what was wrong, but she could also see the state I was in. She told the operator what she saw, where we were. She got me a blanket from her car and wrapped it around me and stayed with me until help arrived. I looked up at her and managed to say the most defeated, desperate thank you I could muster before she left. I recovered shortly after and didn't need to go to the hospital, but was still picked up by family. Bless that woman, wherever she is. Mellow65 answered with, "Edit, thank you all for the kind words and flair, if I even know how all that works. I think this makes my most popular post ever and I was tearing up as I wrote it. I hope you all get a random hug when you most need it, social distancing somehow. My last job was working for the TSA. It was a pretty miserable job and most people didn't like you. I was just having a horrible day filled with personal issues and work issues, and this nice older lady asked if I was okay. I had the standard, yeah, I'm doing fine. And she asked if I could use a hug. I had a blank stare for a second, and then just hugged her. Probably the nicest thing anyone ever did for me when I worked for there. The world needs more people like her." Chords Red followed up with, "I have a similar story. I was living in a one-horse town and working as a cashier in a gas station in my early 20s. I was upset and crying that I hadn't been paid on time and couldn't pay bills, etc. This sweet older lady came in for her weekly newspaper and saw me crying. She asked what was wrong and offered a hug, which I of course accepted. Later on, I started dating my future husband and soon found out that sweet lady was his mom. It's 13 years later and I still feel like I won the mother-in-law lottery." Meow 1983 answered with, "I was in Walmart one day and some dude was blocking the aisle where the item I needed was located. I then heard him ask a Walmart employee where the cabinet liners were. She proceeded to say she wasn't sure and started to send him to the wrong location. I noisily piped up, 'I know where they are. If you want to follow me I will take you to them because I just bought some last week.' The man, 'Oh, okay. Thank you.' He followed me to the opposite side of the store and I showed him where they were. He thanked me again and I hurried back to the other side of the store to get what I needed. 5 minutes later at the self-checkouts the man showed up and I saw him just hanging around with his bag of purchases on his arm. When it came time to pay he stepped up and insisted on paying for my items. I thanked him profusely. At the time I only had $35 in my bank account and was trying to purchase food for the week. This man who I was so annoyed with helped me so much. I still tear up when I think of his kindness. I am a single mother of 2 wonderful kids and this was my miracle." Well, there you have it. A perfectly great question answered by a bunch of fine and honorable citizens. Help support this channel by smashing the like and subscribe buttons. And hit that silly little bell as well to ensure you get the latest videos as they come out. Fred is always finding stuff for me to post regularly. So this is Derek signing off. Thanks for watching. Good grief, it sounds like Fred is out of his pen again. I think he found more drama for me to share with you. See you soon.